Hi, folks. This is just a short, quick check-in from Allison, and I'm not yelling at anybody today. Actually, I did get a nice email just now with a question about. It was a question about AI and game theory, and it was nice because it was clear this person has been sort of looking at the clips that I've been putting up over the past couple days. And last night, Jason and Leo and I had a nice long marathon chat. It's about 4 hours that was really looking into Michael Levin and Neri Oxman's work and this idea of intelligent matter and programmable matter and templating and Web3. So Jason's in the process of editing that. I'm expecting we'll probably stream it maybe over the weekend. And then building off of that, I actually have a lot more material that I want to connect with that has to do with games, emergent games, narrative structure, some of these other things. And so Jason and I are going to do another one. And this is all to say it's somewhat related to the question that was posed. And the person said that, I could reply by email or online. And so I thought some other people might get something out of it. So I would just do sort of a quick off the cuff discussion. So this is from the email. It says a question pertaining to AI, game theory, and emergence. And so I would say, if you haven't checked, I posted about 4 clips today. They're a little bit on the longer side, maybe 7 to 10 minutes, but talks from this guy, Michael Mateus, who I learned about through my friend Sean over in Washington State. And he was at the university, is at the University of California, Santa Cruz, involved in expressive intelligence, which is essentially coming up with emergent interactive digital media gaming systems. So there were some clips from talks that he had given about working with an AI system to begin to automate interactive storytelling. And we know that story is really important. And then this morning, I put up another one from someone else who was also working in this lab at University of California, Santa Cruz, that was about essentially coming up with an AI assistant for essentially dungeon masters or game masters for tabletop games, and the role of the game master, the dungeon master, in setting up and directing gameplay of the other players, and how to use technology to manage the character assignments, which again, I think some of this computation is going to be related to archetypes. And, this has a lot to do with your sort of blockchain, identity systems and your social interactions. So you might want to check those out because this is some of the context. So this was the observation that I got by email. When a game is created, the creator of the game has roughly designed it with a beginning and an end goal. And this is how they understand it. However, the space between could be hard-lined rules and a rigid course, or it could be very loose lines and very generous open playboard for creative emergence that even the creator has no idea such possibilities were possible. And I would say that's a really accurate observation. And some of the work that I was looking into preparing for the discussion I did with Leo and Jason, it was actually looking at the work of John von Neumann, who is a pioneer in early computation, the early ENIAC machines, and the cellular automata. And, those early computers were, besides being really big, were very fragile because they ran on these vacuum tubes and they were always blowing. So they were running these really long programs. And then oftentimes the programmers would have to run in and fix the vacuum tubes that had blown. So what von Neumann was looking for at the end of his life was a more resilient and robust computer. And one of the things he was looking at was actually how plants function. And again, the function of plants for von Neumann reminds me a lot of the work Levin is doing with planaria in terms of a distributed sensing system, like a different kind of intelligence that we would understand human intelligence. And he was looking at plants and then how plants would respond to being eaten by an insect, and then the transmissions and how they became resilient in responding to that, and thinking about that in terms of computation. And, when I first started researching all of this in terms of impact finance and smart cities, I noticed that the Rockefeller Foundation was doing a lot of work in resilient cities. So they were talking about resilience, especially in the context of cities. And if you are using the lens that I don't know if it's the ultimate goal, but a major goal of what is underway is to network and integrate relationships among life on this planet into a system that through different kinds of heuristics, symbols, interactions, can begin to perform some sort of computation, problem solving, puzzle solving, that is maybe either more efficient or goes beyond the capacity of the current technologies, which are crystalline based technologies. But we're butting up against Moore's law here. And so they're trying to figure out what comes after Moore's law, and these new forms of computing are using light, optics, and photonics. And I believe that this biodigital convergence is about using biological life forms that are already doing computation. I mean, our bodies function as computers, if you want to reduce it to that, in terms of all of the homeostatic functions that a body has to do to keep itself together and functioning in the world. That is a computational and a manufacturing system. And then there's this interest in overlaying so that someone else can use it for some other kind of problem solving. And then not just within your own biology, but actually in relation to one another, so that through computational sociology, whole societies, and not just human societies, but human and plants and animals and waters, like almost an animist version that is, as soon as everything gets given a digital wallet and a unique identifier and can be mapped from the sky or the satellite systems, as the network progresses, like I think the goal is to integrate all beings, on the planet into this, even Leo's talked about Arise, they're in the barcode of life. They're getting down to every single like little insect, even the invertebrates. So I think that is, if not the ultimate goal, one of the core goals of the why, not just to make money, not just to make boss people around, but to actually tap into the complexity of our biology and our sociology to do the puzzle solving. So this is sort of on point about you have different kinds of games. And earlier on, someone put me onto the book, this guy, Paul, James Carse, I think, Carse, Infinite Games, and talking about different kinds of games. I think he was affiliated with NYU, maybe a professor, and back a ways, maybe in the 80s. But that finite games you play to win and infinite games you play to keep going indefinitely. And there are these different kinds of game systems. And this person is right in that some games have more structured rules and then some have more open-ended rules. And then this is what Michael Mateus from University of California, Santa Cruz, the game designer, was talking about. In one of the clips, he described the difference between a choose your own adventure game, which is maybe not a single hard line, but a decision trees. You get to a point and you make a decision A or B. And then from that point, there's 2 more points and so on. These break out, but they become sort of linear. And from one point of disconnect, you can never get back. And that's a little bit connected to like the Hugh Everett III's many worlds thing, but it progresses in a forward facing way. And I think what the new biohybrid convergence kind of calculation system that is the noosphere or is Gaia or whatever is actually decentralized and distributed. And so it's all over the place network, more of a chaotic quantum entanglement than like a linear static progression. And so that's what Web3 is about creating the infrastructure for society to act like a neural network. And then through logic gates of smart contracts to do either reinforcement or pruning of nodes that are either helping solve the problem or not solving the problem or inhibiting the problem. And so I feel like that's actually what's happened to some of us who are trying to, if the ultimate computation is to try to bring about maybe AGI or something else, people who are questioning it get pruned off. Their voices get pruned off and marginalized. And then the people who are saying things that are conducive to the agenda get reinforced. And that's how sort of the neural network works. And I think that's how the Web3 distributed animist life form on Earth, supercomputing might be imagined to work. At least this is where I stand now. Now I can always get new information and understand it differently later. But this is how I understand it now. So yes, they are correct in that you have games. There's a goal. So this is goal-oriented behavior. This is connected to, again, cybernetics is core here. All of this behaviorism, Skinner, rewards, tokens, leaderboards, digital wallets, badges. That is all about the goal. And that goal is a programming, right? A programming task. But how you get to the goal varies, either something more structured or something more open-ended. And so I would say we are moving towards systems that are increasingly going to be open-ended and complex and emergent. And so this is the question. It says, so my question is this: is the AI studying our creative emergence that will eventually be programmed into the AI being artificial intelligence? Or is our human creativity emergence a truly unique and human-only quality that it's ours and ours alone? Or am I off the mark? And so I guess before I can answer this question, and this is something I've been going back and forth with like Deep about and Jason about, is I feel like, how shall I say this? This is like, these are energetic constructs, these thought forms, these ideas to have like a biodigital, global supercomputer. While there are organizations and people who are connected to programs to put in the infrastructure for this, it's easily been going this trajectory straight on since World War II, if not earlier, right? The Rad Lab the Alfred Loomis predates World War II, in the 30s, doing this high level physics, Santa Fe Institute, Los Alamos, the Human Genome Project. Like, the trajectory has been there, at least throughout much of the last 100 years. I don't know what has the task list for the programs. I don't know that it's necessarily, Michael Levin will often talk about things being in different time scales, so that we're good at identifying things that are functioning in our own time scale, but not so much other time scales. For example, like, it's hard to understand the intelligence of a massive oak tree because that time scale is very different from a human time scale intelligence. And sometimes it feels to me that whatever might be having a task list for this computing system might be outside our functioning time scale, whatever that means. If that means an intradimensional, like something that's actually outside, so that these things that have been coming for decades and decades, and we say, oh, it can't possibly be integrated or coordinated because it's too complicated. I feel like if there was a system operating outside this as a simulation or Maya, that it would be much more understandable, or there might be an intelligence there that has a different kind of mind that's operating on a different time scale, that it would be all very straightforward. And we're muddling around because we're operating in our own more limited capacity. So I don't know what is doing the programming, and I don't know where it inhabits. And I don't find the question of like the who or the what super satisfying, because I'm curious with the how and the why. And a lot of the who and the what is sort of like about assigning blame and then maybe coming up with a strategy of, reducing that threat or something like that. And I'm just not sure. To me, this feels more spiritual. This feels more like our goal is to be, have a strong moral compass, be very clear, have our values, and operate from that point. And that if this is an energetic system, that's how we clear it, not by going and putting 500 people, the cabal or whomever, like, in jail. I just don't think that that's how it's going. So I don't really find the blame pointing helpful. So this is all to say, like, is the AI studying our creative emergence? Like, I'm not really sure what the AI is. I think largely that the conversation around generalized artificial intelligence right now is being managed largely to obscure a lot of the other emerging technologies that we should be paying closer attention to. And it's like the AI is like the Bill Gates, right? It's more than Bill Gates, but he's the guy that carries that, or the Klaus Schwab. The AI is the thing we're allowed to talk about, and the other things you're not allowed to talk about. And so what we're not talking about is the Web3 integrating, using environmental templates to create logic circuits to govern society computationally. We're not really talking about that, other than like it's great and it's our freedom money, or it's, you know, our way to be secure and have a truthful environment or whatever. We're not talking about critiquing Web3. I don't think in the mainstream media we're talking a lot about the biodigital convergence, and that it's far more than genetic engineering. It's much more about nanomachines and frequency engineering and oscillation and group synchronization. So those are things that we're not talking about. You know, and we do, I think there is like more common discussions about the quantum computing, quantum physics. That's a little bit more there. But I think that the quantum, the AI obscures largely the Web3 and the Internet of Bio-Nano things. And I think that that's by design. So if you take that piece out, is the AI studying us? Like, I don't know what is studying us. I think there is a system. For me, I prefer to call it a system than assign it to a person. And I don't know where it exists exactly. I think it has a different time scale, but that something is studying our creative emergence and to program it into the AI. And based on all of the information that I have seen, I really feel that there's something about our embodiment in a body that relates to our utility as part of distributed cognition. Like, and if you go back to J.D. Bernal, the crystallographer, and his imagining that we would be outside a body and our brain would then be in a cylinder and all of these things, like he was a crystallographer. Our bodies are crystalline technology. Like our bodies are latent crystalline technology, like not in a woo-woo new age sort of way. They just are. Like the water, the minerals, like our bones have piezoelectricity. Like we are technology already. Very high sophisticated levels of technology that these little things are like clawing around trying to get into through the digital convergence. So I would say it's not about us. I think the narrative is about us putting our mind into a mind file, into AI, or into like a humanoid robot or something like that. But functionally, I think that the embodied intelligence is core. So they're studying the emergence. I think the embodiment is part of it. And then they go on to say, is our human creativity and emergence a unique and human only quality that is ours and ours alone? And so in this, I would actually agree with Levin, like not on his terms necessarily. I mean, Levin sees the world in an animist way, but I would think Levin and Oxman see the world in an animist way that is based in molecular computing, like digital computing. And I prefer to see the world in an animist way, having learned and a respect for indigenous spirituality and right relationship, which I think is very different than the Centaur Chimera hybrid program that Levin and Oxman are pursuing. But I do see that there is animism. And I think Levin is correct in that there are many different kinds of intelligences in the world that are creative and important. And so it's not strictly a human piece. Although like we're the humans, so we can speak for ourselves. And I think there is an aspect that isn't going to be in the AI. I don't think it's ever going to be in the AI that has to do with creativity is part of it. I think love is part of it. And I think our soul is part of it. I think there's a reason that they've come up with soul-bound tokens to be these metadata tags for our digital twins, is that they're trying to build a soul. This guy, I think his last name is Dorner, Yosha Bach's mentor when he was developing MicroSci, the software to project human emotion and behavior. Dorner's work was literally coming up with a blueprint for the soul. So, I mean, I think we can debate souls in other beings besides humans, but I do feel like the soul of the human is a key piece. And in some ways, like this idea of a mind file feels like a golem, right? A soulless mirror image that is missing that key piece. And I think in some ways it feels like the goal is to create scenarios in which, in the name of sovereignty, that we will agree to be a mind file, to become a digital agent, or have a digital agent operate on our behalf. And then somehow that's going to start to interfere with our idea of a natural death. That's going to merge into longevity studies and rejuvenation and these other things that are more transhumanist in nature. And I'm very uncomfortable with that idea. And my father just died after a long struggle with dementia, and I'm very sad to not have him with me anymore. But I was with him when he died, and there was a satisfaction for me that he got to die. He was a man of faith, and he got to die a natural death. And I do feel like we're on a precipice with these digital twins, of not being able to actually die, but having some sort of quantum entanglements with these digital golems that is going to interfere with our process of passing, into the next life and meeting the creator. And, if you're part of karma or not, like what happens next, that these mind files are going to start to gum up the works in that. So I don't know if AI is studying emergence. I know there's a whole lot of scientists and researchers who are studying emergence. Complexity, for me, complexity and emergence has been a real focus for the last 6 to 8 months. And I think that's critical if we're looking at all the things of quote unquote Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and we're not incorporating the complexity and the game mechanics and the Web3, then we're really operating in an incomplete scenario, that those things are really super important. I think that there's a reason that arts and culture are tapped into this. And this is something I'm going to talk about a little bit with Jason. I don't know if I'm going to get into it in tomorrow's podcast, but this guy, Steven Schaefer, that Steffers turned me on to with like the Pacific Rim Institute. And he was connected to something, Digipen, I think it was a video game design company in Redmond, Washington. And he was connecting this idea of energetic entanglement and energy fields and Jungian archetypes and psychoanalysis to the use of, he called them psychoecology video games, that we would participate in collectively in these psychoecology video games to energetically do collective healing. Although from this person, he's written quite a bit, and it's very clear that he has a very strong ideological inclination that's really makes it clear that he doesn't understand the role of polarization in all of this. And I certainly wouldn't want to change myself to fit into his get healing from his Jungian psychoecology video game program, because he seems like a really someone who doesn't really actually understand what's happening. But there is something about like our psyche, our soul, our creativity. And I Michael Bloomberg Philanthropies went in really deep into funding for arts, funding for culture, the Knight Foundation, funding for arts, funding for culture. I think there's some aspect of semiotics there in terms of encoded language and imagery in the arts and culture, in the theatrical space. I mean, in Philadelphia, even I haven't checked recently, but the last theater season, people were still required to wear masks. They were the most hardcore about the health passport requirements. And that's because this art and theater is a key part of the emergence. So, overall, I think these are really good questions. The good observation that, yes, I think what Web3 is programming is an interactive game space. And I think that game space is not just going to be limited to humans. Remember, Leo talked about Jonathan Ledgard and that they want to give digital wallets to animals, right? And again, think about the injections with the animals too. Like if some of this is about nano machine, like frequency vibration. And, Melanie Swan has already spoken a lot about cloud mines and blockchaining your way into cloud mines and getting micropayments based on it working in a digital problem space. Those minds aren't going to all be human. Like there'll be human minds. I think there might be some sort of, once they can find a way to translate or fake that they're translating animal minds, machine minds, they're going to come up with symbolic ways of us I think, the goal is for us to interface with this in these digital realms. So those are going to be open-ended games where there's like a program outcome and then and maybe multiple nodes solving. I'm trying to remember, there was a play back when I could still go to see plays by a small film company. It was actually like in the Lithuanian Cultural Center, but it wasn't a Lithuanian group. And it's a one word. It wasn't iteration, but it was something like that. And it was a one scene play in an office. And it was all of these business consultants, like, Boston Consulting Group types of people. And they were like in a hurry. It was a Friday afternoon. They want to go take their kids to soccer and go to the cookout or whatever. But they had to solve this problem. It was about all of these disposing of dead bodies, like massive numbers of, and it was a psychology game. And then by the end, they're like, well, what is this really about? And is this real? Is this just a scenario? Are there other teams coming up with problems for this? And that's part of it. I mean, is that they then they're like, well, if we come up with the wrong idea, are we going to be killed, or all the other teams going to be eliminated? And so this iterative process, I think that's going to be the goal, and to put people on UBI and then have them be lifelong learners. And I think the lifelong learners you could substitute with lifelong gamers and lifelong problem solvers. So the creativity is important. I don't think it's exclusively human. I think Levin is right in terms of the animism, but I do think that this is, to me, somewhat of a sacred, energetic engagement. I wouldn't say that there's just one right spiritual practice, but I think sacred versus profane is very relevant. And something's out there optimizing this new computing system. Something's out there putting the infrastructure in place. Something's out there telling stories that will make it attractive for us to enter into this gameplay. And that was one of the things that Michael Matthias, of the game designer, was talking about in his AI software-assisted emergent storytelling program. What he said was, there's someone who initiates a game, and then the person has to accept. And then it goes on from there. And I think that's actually part of Karsa's infinite games, finite and infinite games, is that if you can't force anyone to play. If you force someone to play, then it actually doesn't work as a game. So the sacred and profane part is like, I guess we have to figure out, if we're not going to play, and then what that looks like, how to not play. But for what it's worth, what I'm realizing in all of this is that all of the social media space is a game. It's a social game. While I've made some nice connections, I would say they've been balanced with really hard relational losses, and feeling targeted by these spaces. And now I can see actually how it works, how these AI programs are setting things up for the objective. If the objective is to marginalize Allison and Jason's voices and whatever, how that happens, like, as an emergent objective. And that's that, I guess it's effective to a certain extent, but I do think that there is a butterfly effect. So as long as I'm still being heard somewhere, it matters. But I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question. And I would say, if you're looking for a good read, Jane, who is the character in the Enderverse books. So I think there's some of these, often science fiction like tips its hand to what's actually happening. And just like Neil Stephenson, Orson Scott Card is someone who seems to know a lot. And so Ender's Game is the more popular one that was made into the movie, but there are 3 other books that follow. Speaker for the Dead, Xenocide, Exnocide, and Children of the Mind. And in those 3 games, when Ender enters into a fantasy game in Battle School, he activates like an AI system. And then ultimately, in one of the books, the AI system is used to manage his like trust fund or something. He gets like exiled because at first everyone's happy that he helped them kill the buggers, and then he's the hero, and then he's the anti-hero because people realize that genocide is bad. But he has a trust fund that's like going on and on for years, and he's jumping to time dimensions. And so for 1,000 years, someone's managing his money, and it turns out that it's the architecture of the fantasy game that has become manifest as a personality called Jane. And then Jane is an AI that is his mentor, that lives in a jewel in his ear, just like these little earbuds, and talks to him and is his guide essentially for the last 3 of the book. So when we're talking about some of the stuff about panpsychism and connectedness, there is this connection between biophysics and econophysics. So it's interesting that Jane got her start out as an investment manager, like a money manager. But this AI guide thing is there. So, if you're interested in having some thoughts about the AI conversation, I think Jane is an interesting model. And I think that's what they're imagining, that everyone will have their own personal AI to steer them as they do the puzzle solving. So I'm much less concerned about some AGI coming to take over the world and destroying everyone than I am the subtle use of AI in these gaming simulations to invite us in to be connected puzzle solvers for something that we don't quite understand, where we actually lose our agency as, our own independent beings, given life by God, the creator. So anyway, hopefully that helps people understand what I'm thinking about AI at the moment. I would say largely the AGI conversation, besides the fact that I'm not super excited about like the Sophia the robot having their blockchain minds. I'm far more interested in the Web3 mechanics and the nano machine, biodigital convergence than I am the AGI conversation now. So thanks for joining in.